Hi, welcome to the Flawed Theology Podcast. I'm Phil.
And I'm Susie, and we're asking the question, if your theology were wrong, wouldn't you want to know?
All right, well, hey, everybody. We've arrived at the season 1 finale. Kind of hard to believe that this is our 15th episode, which is pretty crazy. We're just under 5,000 downloads, so thanks everybody who's joined us along the way.
Yeah, thank you. This has been amazing.
So yeah, we're going to do something a little different for the season finale. We're going to do kind of a Q&A. We got a lot of cool questions from the community. But before we get into that, we kind of had a little, I don't know, would you say this is just like something that is stuck in your craw? And it's like, we got to talk about this because it's like,
yes.
it's so ridiculous.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know who William Lane Craig is, he's probably like the biggest current Christian apologist around.
He's known for being quite reasonable. He's not like Ken Ham or Kent Hovind where they are intentionally deceitful.
Yeah.
I think William Lane Craig is more reasonable.
He has a show called Reasonable Faith where he takes questions from people. And on July 18th, he took a question from a guy named Kyle who sent in this question. I'm going to read it. It's kind of edited for brevity because it was kind of a long question. But he basically said, Christianity requires a lot of work to follow. You have to orient your entire life around Jesus. Christianity is not just a set of propositions that one holds, but it's a faith practice, a way of life. With that in mind, shouldn't one require very high epistemic standards before one decides that they will dedicate their life to Christ? I mean, that's a fantastic question. Like,
it is. Yeah.
It's a question that probably every Christian should ask themselves and they should ask their leadership.
Right. I think a lot of Christians probably do think this, but they would never vocalize it.
Right. How did he answer? Like, because this is the crazy part. Like,
this is the fun part. So I'm going to be William Lane Craig. He said, when I first heard the message of the gospel as a non-Christian high school student, that my sins could be forgiven by God, that God loved me, and that I could come to know him and experience eternal life with God, I thought to myself, if there is just one chance in a million that this is true, it's worth believing. So, far from raising the bar or the epistemic standard that Christianity must meet to be believed, I lower it. I think that this is a message that is so wonderful, so fantastic, that if there's any evidence that it's true, then it's worth believing in, especially when you compare it to the alternatives like naturalism or atheism or other forms of life. So what is this telling us about William Lane Craig's faith?
It's so mind-boggling. Like, it's
not based on evidence. No. It's based on what he wants to be true, what he finds hope and meaning in.
Yeah.
Not about what he finds convincing.
Yeah, it's confirmation bias. Like, and he admits it. That's the crazy thing.
That's the crazy thing is that he admitted this.
He just admitted it. Like,
the atheist YouTube channels that picked it up kind of exploded it. It was Apologia, I think, that first picked it up.
Yes.
And then Mythvision picked it up after that.
Yeah.
And that's how I heard about it. And I was like, wow, we got to talk about this on the podcast because it's not every day that an apologist comes out and readily admits that they are lowering their epistemic standards to believe something because they want to believe it so badly.
Yeah. And the thing that's really crazy about it is like, I could see, okay, if it's maybe your run-of-the-mill Christian, that's like, well, you know, I know there's some problems with, you know, the logic and reasoning, but, you know, the overall message is just so great that, like, I really want it to be true, and so I'm going to believe it. I can't see William Lane Craig, whose whole identity is wrapped up in logic and reason and evidence and proof and all that stuff, saying, oh, well, if it's only 1 in a million chance, he's resting his eternal destiny on a 1 in a million chance.
Yeah.
And he said, if. He didn't even say there is. He said, if there's a 1 in a million chance.
I think he would say there is more than 1 in a million. But the fact that he is admitting what his motivations are means that he's not a Christian because he finds the evidence or the arguments convincing.
Right.
He's a Christian just because he thinks it sounds good. And then he's contorting and adopting arguments that he might not ordinarily in order to preserve that worldview and to promote that worldview.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Another thing to mention is that he talks about how great his experience is being a Christian. It fills him with hope and wonder and love. But not everybody has that experience. I mean, we talk to people every day who come out of the church with trauma.
Right.
Try telling them that they should believe it if there's a 1 in a million chance. Is it worth it to them? I don't think so.
Right. No. Yeah, not everyone has that same experience. And honestly, even if you did have the same exact experience, it's still not a real good justification.
Right.
Because then again, you're still basing it all on your experience and your feelings.
Yeah.
Which is the direct opposite of what Christianity tells its followers, is that your feelings are fickle. You can't trust them. You have to trust in the inerrant, infallible word of God because it's right.
Yeah, it's kind of like a child wanting so badly to believe in Santa Claus because Santa Claus brings you presents and is nice and jolly.
Right.
And so you believe it just because if there's a 1 in a million chance that Santa is real, it's worth believing. That doesn't make Santa any more real.
Right. There's no real reason that we wanted to talk about this except for that it's just so wild. But if you want to dig deeper into this, we'll post the links to the Reasonable Faith interview and then Paulogia and Myth Vision's kind of rebuttal to it. And I think there's some other people that posted about it because it was kind of a big
it was a big deal.
It's good information to hear kind of how people responded to it too.
And to keep in mind, not just William Lane Craig, but any apologist, what their motivations are and what confirmation biases they might have.
So let's get into our questions. We received a good amount of questions.
So this one is for Phil. Growing up in the uber controlling Christian household you did, when you left, did you go on a secular music journey? As you discovered new music, did you feel cheated? And finally, was there a band or artist that you were told was super evil and after you listened to them, couldn't understand what the big deal was?
That's a good question. I grew up in a really musical family. So like from a very young age, I was like singing special music, at church, like that whole thing. So music was definitely a big thing for me. I don't think I really cared too much about secular music until I got into like probably high school, because I don't think even middle school anything other than like Christian music was on my radar.
Did you go to a Christian middle school? I forget.
Oh yeah, I went to Christian everything. So
okay.
K through 12. So yeah. So I think the first secular band, I use secular in quotes, band that I discovered was U2. As far as secular bands go, that's probably the most innocuous secular band that you can come across.
Yeah.
So I remember having the War CD in my backpack after school one day and my parents coming across it and they lost their shit about
really?
U2,
about U2.
Like, about U2. And I had to, remind them that 3 of the 4 members of U2 were Christians. My parents, of course, rebutted with, well, they're Catholics. And I was like, So
okay.
I remember also getting busted with a Paula Abdul CD, which to this day, I'm probably just ashamed of having, but
hang on a second. Paula Abdul, my uncle is a pastor and my cousins, his daughters, they all loved Paula Abdul and they were all fine with it. He's a Lutheran pastor.
Oh yeah. Hey, but we've already established
your parents are nuts.
Yeah. Your childhood, my childhood, vastly different. But yeah, so Paula Abdul, was the another CD that I had. And my parents were like, you can't listen to this music. It's going to send you down the wrong path. So me being the rebellious cuss that I was, my response to this was, I'm going to find the hardest Christian music that I could find. Screamo, death metal.
Yeah.
You can't understand the thing they're saying. I'd be blasting it in my room and my parents would come up and be like, what is that devil music? And I would just hand them the liner notes and it was all Christian lyrics. And
you found a loophole.
Yeah, there was nothing they could do about it, So yeah, I guess the second part of the question, like there isn't anything that I was told was super evil and I found out later that, it was evil or it wasn't. It was just music. Like I'm still a huge U2 fan to this day. And it's funny now actually being post-Christian, listening to U2, a lot of the experiences I had like in live concerts with U2 were very like worship like. And I compared to the like, this is like being with God. And now I realize, of course, that's just the same emotional manipulation you feel when you listen to Hillsong,
Right.
So yeah. But what about you? Do you have any musical thoughts? Like how was music in your upbringing?
Well, totally different from yours. I was allowed to listen to whatever I wanted. And my first concert I ever went to with my best friend and her little sister when I think I was 12, we went to a Third Eye Blind concert. My parents let me go. I went to HF Festival every year. If you're from the DC area, you know what HF Festival was.
Yeah.
I just went to a lot of rock concerts. My parents were totally fine with it.
Nice.
But as far as church music, this is funny. When I read your question, I really dug this out of my memory. But I joined choir when I was in high school because I love to sing and I loved singing the hymns and I still love that. My sister and I will get together at Christmas sometimes and we'll sing at the piano and we'll harmonize. So I was the youngest person in the choir by like 30 years, but I loved doing it. It was all purely selfish reasons because I enjoyed it.
Right.
And I felt like it was an easy way for me to check off that box of like, I'm doing something to serve the church. Because, you know, how much it was pressured on us to be a servant in Christ, evangelize, and I don't know, use your talents for the church. And my mom did that. She used her talents by teaching Sunday school and teaching VBS. And I had zero interest in doing that. I did not like to work with kids. So this was like the way I could check off that box and do something I wanted. And I kind of felt guilty that I was using it that way, but that made me feel better, I guess, because I knew I wasn't like totally into church.
Right. Were Lutheran choirs like really good, like musically, or were they like
ours.
just a hodgepodge of awful tone deaf people?
I mean, we weren't terrible. There were a few really good singers.
Yeah.
But overall, we were just mediocre.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. Good question. Thanks for sending that in.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's go on to our next question. This one came in and it says, I want to know how a God can be described as loving. And then it clearly says that he's jealous and angry. And love is not jealous and angry. If I could see all of time as a whole and I knew my baby would suffer their entire lifetime, I would abort them. But God can see all these people who will suffer in eternity, and he still makes them. He hates abortion so badly, but instead of sending the baby the 10-year-old victim doesn't want into her womb, he could send it to the infertile couple who have been praying for years for a child. But instead of that, he sends it to people to harass at an abortion clinic. Instead of feeding starving people, he helps Linda find her car keys and make it to work on time.
Well, at least Linda got to work.
Yeah. So what's your thought on this about, you know, God being loving, but doing the kind of shit that he does?
Yeah, well, I think this question is really insightful because it's thinking beneath the surface. I think it's another example of how Christianity, it depends on people not thinking too hard about what they're being taught. So, we're not saying names, right?
Right.
So she's absolutely right. There is a lot about reality that does not agree with there being a perfectly loving, omniscient God. And yeah, like imagine your child is kidnapped by a sex trafficker. Phil, wouldn't you do everything in your power to get your child back?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything you could. God could easily do it. Easily.
Right.
He has the power. He has the knowledge of where your child is to rescue your child or to even prevent it from happening, but he doesn't.
Right.
And to me, that doesn't sound like love. So yes, I totally agree with the person who's asking this question. And I know that the Christian would say it's because of free will, but that does not hold up for me because giving the sex trafficker free will to sex traffic takes away the free will of that innocent child to not be sex trafficked.
Right.
So apparently it's more important to God that bad people be allowed to do bad things than for other people to not have bad things done to them.
Yeah.
So that sounds like something more an unloving God or the devil would do, not a loving God.
Right.
What do you think about it?
Yeah. And for me, I think it really depends on, you know, your definition of love. You know, if you're a person who's been taught to believe that love is rooted in power and control, and that the person who's doing the loving is an absolute authority, has absolute knowledge, and is perfect, well, then how can that person being loved complain or question how they're being loved? You know, it's really the definition of an abusive relationship.
So it's like submit, don't question. That's what you're saying.
The way God can do this is because, well, he's allowed to do whatever he wants because he's God. And us as the lowly humans don't have any ability to question or complain about it because we're just lowly humans. And then you get the his ways are higher than our ways horse shit. We're not allowed to question. It begs the question, how can God be considered loving when his method of redemption was to kill his only son? And then by extrapolation, he asked his followers to do the same thing. You know, Abraham, he said, hey, go kill your only son, Isaac. And Abraham did it. Like he was going to do it without question. It was just like, you know, so if you're viewing God in that way, then your definition of love is just skewed.
It's not the kind of love that we have evolved as a species. Right. And the kind of love that we have for our children. That's not the kind of love that God has for us.
It's not the kind of love that you would want to have in any other sphere of your life.
Yeah.
If you met a man or a woman or whatever gender you choose to love, and they loved you the way God does, you would be filing a police report, and trying to get restraining orders.
Yeah.
I know one of the Born Again episodes talk about how that relationship with God is like an abusive relationship. And I wrote a blog about this too, and like side by side compared red flags from abusive relationships to your relationship with God. So you make a good point.
Yeah.
God not loving. And then
the car keys.
The last thing about the car keys.
I know.
That is one of my biggest pet peeves when people say, oh, God gave me a parking space at Target and he's just so good. And I'm like, really? There's a genocide in Rwanda going on, but he got you a fucking
and like all the kids being raped in the Catholic churches and other places. I mean, that was just an example.
Yeah.
That's happening in his house. If you count Catholics as Christians.
Right. Not like my parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't add up. It does not add up. Yeah, good question.
Great question. Yeah, thanks for sending that one in. All right. As Christians, did you ever believe that you felt the presence of God? What sensations did you experience? And assuming that you had them, how do you now interpret those experiences? Okay,
so this will be short for me because I basically never did, except for only 2 times. I can remember feeling something. I was pretty young and I was reading my Bible and I put my Bible down and I was just laying on my bed and thinking about like what it would be like if Jesus was real and he was my friend and he would always protect me. And I loved that idea so much that I was kind of overcome with emotion at that moment. And I don't know, I guess in that moment, I believed it.
Yeah.
But then like those feelings always fade and it wasn't something that was sustainable. I mean, the way I view that now is that I was a little kid and I wanted safety and security and that was offered to me in the Bible. And so I tried to accept it.
Yeah.
The second time was when the first time I went to InterVarsity fellowship in my freshman year of college. I was used to the Lutheran style, like organ music and hymns and stuff. And I had never been exposed to this worship type music that I guess you were so involved in.
Yeah.
And I was not prepared for that emotional manipulation. And so I, fell victim to that.
Yeah.
Just one time.
Oh, just one time?
Just one time, yeah. So I never went back after that.
Oh, you didn't?
Not to the fellowship. I did like the small groups and stuff, but I never did that like
went to the bands
meeting again.
Yeah.
I never did.
Big meeting. That's a good time. I don't know if that's what Ivy calls it.
I don't remember. So what about you? Did you ever feel like you felt God?
For me, I feel like it was kind of different. I think I definitely felt the presence of God in a different way, and probably not in the way that most Christians would want to like admit that they feel the presence of God. Growing up like fundamentalist Baptists, it wasn't emotions and feelings about God weren't something that you talked about. Like the charismatics did that, they had the Holy Spirit and the speaking of tongues and the holy barking and the holy laughter. We thought all that was horse shit.
Sorry, what?
Oh, you don't know about
barking?
Holy barking? Yeah. Look, YouTube that one. It'll change your life.
Okay.
But yeah, so like, Baptists are pretty reserved in their, worship style. So the presence of God that you felt as a Baptist was guilt, shame, and conviction.
Oh, that's depressing.
So yeah, I felt the presence of God that way for probably the first 16 or 17 years of my Christian life.
Do you know what that makes me think of? Or if you're using eye drops and they start to burn, it's like, that's how you know it's working. Right. If you feel the burning, that's how you know it's working. If you feel that pain, that's how you know God's with you.
Right. Oh, and that's definitely something that, you're taught in that mindset is like, well, if bad things happen, it's because God's trying to teach you something. If you feel like shit as a person, well, you're in tune with God because he is telling you how great he is and how worthless you are. So
what if you have a good life and you're happy?
Oh, well, you still give God all the credit for that. Or you manufacture persecution so that way you can feel like everyone else. But like later in my Christian life, then I kind of discovered worship, kind of like you did at IV or whatever. And I got into leading worship and all of that stuff. And so then I had the opposite experience of like, okay, well, now I can be the one levying the conviction on people. So I was like, oh, this is a new power that I have, Ooh, I can really manipulate a lot of people into connecting with God. Of course, at the time, I didn't realize that's what I was
use those
doing.
Words. Yeah.
I thought I was connecting with God and sharing that connection with other people. And I mentioned this earlier. I had this realization on the floor at some U2 concert, and I was like, oh man, I feel like really close to God here. But I never connected those two feelings that I felt there with the same thing that happened in church, occasionally.
Yeah, right.
And how do I view kind of some of those things now is like, well, they were just emotional responses to whatever situation I was in. On the negative side with the conviction, it's like I was a child that was basically being perpetually told you're a sinner and you're worthy of hell. How else are you going to process that except for,
right,
get me out of this and I'll believe whatever you want me to so I can not feel this way.
That's horrible what you just said. I'll believe whatever you want me to. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
The way you said that, it just hits home how much spiritual abuse this is. Did you ever believe in miracles, answered prayer, prophecy, faith healing, or revelation? And how do you see that now?
Answered prayer, yes. But yeah, like I said earlier, being a fundamentalist, we didn't believe in prophecy or faith healing or, any of that miraculous stuff. That was all for the charismatics,
Okay, yeah.
People definitely claim to have prayers answered. And I remember as a child, we were in like dire financial straits, but it seemed like we always were.
Yeah.
And I remember like we were coming back from somewhere and I remember my parents being like upset and saying, we don't have any food. Like, I don't know how we're going to do dinner tonight. Right. And we pulled in the driveway and there was like bags and bags of groceries on our front stoop. My parents like lose their shit and I'm like, yay, we're going to freaking eat. Like, it wouldn't matter what's in that bag, And so I definitely took that as God answering prayer and God's miraculous provision. But it was people. The church knew we were poor.
Right.
And yes, it was probably because of their faith and their belief that they thought we should help people. But there's plenty of people that would do that now for people with no motivation of God or faith.
Yes.
How I view that kind of stuff now is really it's just people being human to other people. When you hear about a need, if you're a decent human being, you try to figure out a way that you can meet that person's need.
Humans don't even have to be involved. It could be like you pray that your wedding day will be sunny and then it's sunny.
Right.
That's just chance,
Right.
But people will construe natural patterns of probability.
Right.
Or answered prayer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I might be answering this question too.
Well, that's okay. No, yeah. What's your take on this? Like,
well, yeah, same with you. Like my church didn't care too much about prophecy or faith healing, or it wasn't anything that I dealt with.
Right.
My church, yes, definitely answered prayer. I think I've told the story before about my purse that I got back from the hotel after I prayed. But I mean, I called the hotel and I was like, my purse is in room X. It's in the drawer. Can you send it to me? And they're like, right. Okay. So I would have gotten it back anyway.
Right. When you were telling that story, I thought of this time that I drove from my house to a park with my phone on my bumper of my car.
Whoa.
And when I got all the way to the thing, I was like, oh shit, where's my phone? And I went back there and the phone was still on the bumper. And I was like, oh my God, like that's incredible. Like there's guardian angels behind my car holding my phone on. It's like, no, it's
what?
Just physics, like.
That's crazy because that means that the guardian angels care more about your phone than, genocide.
Than the 6-car pileup that happened probably at the same time on a highway.
Right.
Where 3 people died, like.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me that there was a woman at my church who said that an angel, so she skidded on some ice on a turn, like on a wooded road. She was headed towards a guardrail and then her car just kind of like lifted up in the air and went over the guardrail and landed safely on the other side. And she says she believes an angel did it. And my mom, I didn't hear her tell the story, but my mom is the one who told me this. And so my mom was like kind of excited about it. And I was like, huh, really? And I remember even as a kid thinking, but I wonder what kind of other explanations there could be.
Right.
Like really an angel. And I just kept thinking, well, if that's true, like that's kind of cool, but how do we know it was an angel? And I kept thinking, how do we know? How do we know?
Yeah. I can trump that story because I had a similar experience driving to Indiana once in the winter from Harrisonburg, going over the mountain into West Virginia, and there was a blizzard. We're going over this road. It is snowing like insanely, right? And I remember going over the crest of this hill, and then the road started to like turn, and then I went to turn, and the car just started to slide. Now, mind you, we're on the top of a mountain, right? Going down the side of a mountain. So the car is going towards the edge of this mountain where there is a guardrail, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, my wife's going to be freaking out about it.
She's screaming.
And I shit you not, to this day, I believe this happened. We got over to 6 feet from that guardrail, and the car just, it felt like it hit something, and then it went right back into the road, and we just like coasted the rest of the way down the mountain. And I pulled over on the side of the road and was like, holy shit, like, what was that? You know, and of course, being a believer at the time, I was like, well, that was certainly an angel, you know, that prevented us from going over that mountain, because I thought for sure we were going to be dead.
Wow.
Of course, it was probably just a rut in the snow, because you were going between paved, cleared snow that was been driven on, and then high snow. So, but yeah, I remember that clear as day, thinking that was a miracle.
Ooh, well, I'm glad you didn't go over the side of the mountain.
Yeah.
Or we would be here today talking.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, this is how it ends. We're just going to tumble off the side of this mountain. Ends. I was like, yeah.
With a whimper.
Yeah, with a whimper. But miracles?
Nah.
Now, bullshit.
Yeah. So next question, was leaving religion painful for you? Do you ever regret it?
I can say I don't regret it. So I'll answer that part first. No, I don't regret it. And I think it was painful in one sense of like, I was letting go of something that was my whole identity for so much of my life. But then at the same time, it was also freeing, because I was letting go of something that was my whole identity for so much of my life. So it allowed me to create my own identity that was based on who I actually am instead of what I believe.
And trying to figure out who you are at like age 30 something is, I imagine,
it's
difficult.
A little daunting. Like, I realized that like my beliefs were who I was. I didn't have any concept of who I was as a person. And actually, oddly enough, it was a pastor that told me when I was kind of in my deconstruction phase and didn't know it. You know, she was saying, you got to find out who you are outside of being a husband, outside of being a worship leader. You just need to find who Phil is. That was some of the best advice I've ever gotten.
Is that when you decided to be a yo-yoer?
No. That was a long time ago. That was the yo-yoing is a recent addiction. But yeah, I think that the shifting and deconstruction, like it was so gradual. I keep trying to pin down, I think I've said this before, trying to pin down like where you actually started deconverting. And for me, I really can. It's like 10 plus years of time where you had little snippets of deconstruction, but I definitely don't regret it. Like some people might say, well, you wasted all that time. I occasionally will feel that sense of regret, like, oh, I wish I would have gotten out earlier. But I don't ever regret that I did it. But what about you?
In a way, it was painful, but in another way, it wasn't. So when I admitted to myself that I was not a Christian, I felt an exuberance that I had never experienced before in my entire life. It was an exhilarating feeling of finally being able to let go of all those beliefs that I had been hampered with for my whole life that I had never been convinced of. But at the same time, and this was the hard part, I realized now I had to face the fact that I was leaving that identity that I was born into, the one that my entire family had. And that was huge for me. And I also had to tell my husband. So that was also really daunting.
Yeah.
It definitely wrecked my sleep for like weeks.
Oh,
weeks
really?
And weeks. Yeah. It affected me physically in a lot of ways until I really started to like settle into it. The new me, the new belief system.
Right.
Then I was a lot more calm. The stress hormones, that really influences your body. And so in those few weeks, that transition time, I guess that's a good word for it, that transition time, I was completely wrecked.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you wouldn't say that you have any ounce of regret about it.
Oh, not at all.
Yeah. Did you have any difficulty letting go of certain concepts like heaven, hell, sin, inherent authority, absolute truth, stuff like that?
No, I mean, that was the part that was easy for me, letting go of all that stuff, because I was never convinced of it in the first place. You know, I often hear that people mourn the loss of heaven, but that was never something I was ever sure of. And so I was never really attached to that idea. I miss my grandparents a lot. When I thought of them, I always thought, I wonder if they're actually in heaven. I wonder if that exists, or I wonder if they're just gone.
Yeah.
I also never felt like I was under the influence of an authority. I just went about my life and I made my own decisions based on my own intuition. I didn't think about trying to figure out what a God would want. I just trusted myself to make good decisions. And coming out of it, I know that's something that a lot of people struggled with, and they're kind of learning how to do that. And so I feel fortunate that I was in an environment where I was able to do that for myself.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that I had a hard time letting go of was the idea of absolute truth. Because I think the way my brain works, with liking logic and reason and data, I wanted to believe that there was something absolute to build my life on. So believing something and that it had all the answers for my life, no matter what they were, and living a life of absolute certainty, that was not easy to let go of. Like, I didn't do well with the idea of ambivalence or the idea of like, well, maybe something's not true. I fully believed all that stuff down to my core. So that was hard to let go of, the idea that there aren't certain things that are absolutely true in this realm anyway. I do think there are things that are absolutely true.
Okay,
still.
That's what I was going to follow up with. So you do believe there is an absolute truth, right?
Yes, in certain areas. But
I mean, like universal. Like,
yes,
the universe came from somewhere.
Yes.
That's an absolute truth, even if we don't know it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. What I mean by absolute truth is the idea of what you believe about, Jesus or heaven or hell. There is no room for the possibility for it to be wrong.
Okay. That's not quite the definition I think of when I think of absolute truth. So I think that's why I'm confused.
I guess that may be actually more linked to the idea of inherent authority, because like, I believed everything that a pastor told me. I believed everything that the Bible said. And so letting go of that idea of absolute truth, biblical truth, I guess, was not easy for me to do,
So after that truth was gone, you kind of were like, well, what is my absolute truth now?
Right. Where do I get truth from if it's not from the Bible?
Okay, interesting. So where do you get your truth from?
Well, for me, I think now truth is just based on evidence and proof.
Yeah.
If there's no evidence for it, well, then there's no reason to believe that it's true or accept that it's true.
Thanks, Lars.
Yeah. Every time I'm talking to someone about evolution now, the first thing I say is, you don't believe evolution. You accept it or you don't. So yeah, that was a hard thing to let go of, those kind of, I guess it's not really absolute truth. It's actually letting go of certainty.
Ah, yes. Okay. That makes more sense.
Was hard to let go of.
Yeah.
And then I think the afterlife was like but what if, heaven and hell is real? That was probably like a lingering thing too, because you've been ingrained that like everything that you're doing is for the reward of heaven, so every once in a while I feel like the idea of heaven would sound appealing until I remember that most of the people claim to be going to heaven are people that I really don't want to spend eternity with. So
yeah. Well, I don't know about you, but I always imagined heaven as like a never-ending church service, and that seems insufferable to me. Like, It seems more like hell.
Yeah, hell, I think, was something that I let go kind of early on, because in my shift of deconstruction, when I shifted from the fundamentalist thing to a more progressive theology, the first thing that shifted was that God is a God of love. And so the first thing to go out the door was hell.
So you thought that people either went to heaven or they were annihilated? Or did everybody go to heaven?
I think I thought everybody went to heaven.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I kind of let go of hell because I was like, well, a loving God wouldn't send people to hell, so hell's got to go.
All right, next question. Is there anything about your Christian life that you miss?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that I miss is the feeling of community, because I was so involved. My whole life was Christianity and the church and worship teams and missions, this and fundraisers and all that kind of stuff. So all of those connections that I had, I didn't have anymore. I think in the secular world, you don't find that same kind of, I don't know what you would call it, camaraderie or like-mindedness.
Right.
And I guess it's really more of like a hive brain. In Christianity, you feel like, well, everyone believes this exactly the same way I do. So when I look at a situation and I go to someone with a question, I know that their response is going to be the same thing that I would think.
Oh, so you're like the Borg.
Yeah. So I think that has been kind of hard to let go of. But then I discovered again at the end of my Christian journey, the social justice causes and things that I was passionate about as a progressive Christian. And then I realized well, I don't need the Christianity part to still be passionate about these causes.
Yeah, you can still do it.
You can still do all these things without the help of a deity. So,
yeah.
And then I guess the musical aspects of leading worship, and like there's a real ego boost to standing up in front of hundreds of people and making them eat out of the palm of your hand musically. So
you feel powerful.
And you can't really replicate that in the secular world unless you get really, really famous as a musician. Like I played out at coffee houses and stuff like that. And, it's not the same thing, as having a captive audience of hundreds of people.
Chained to their pews. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the humanist community is working on creating those frameworks.
Yeah.
So that there's something to replace church with.
Yeah. What about you?
I don't miss anything.
None of it?
No. So I didn't have the community aspect that you did. As an adult, I tried kind of not to engage with people.
Okay.
Growing up in my home church, my parents were very involved in church. And so I was involved in that church. But I don't know, like I have a lot of friends. All of them are secular. So I never felt like I lost anything because 97% of my friends are not from church.
Okay.
But ironically, the community aspect that you're talking about, I get that from my son's travel baseball team.
You must have like really nice baseball people because I wouldn't want to hang out
we're
with
honestly like a family.
Yeah, that's cool.
Everybody's very accepting. The only thing that you have to do is, make the team to get on.
Yeah.
You don't have to like profess a dogma or like conform to somebody's expectations.
Well, that's a community it's built organically around the common interest of baseball.
Yeah.
And then, you've connected with a bunch of other humans and you just happen to be linked by baseball.
Right.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of that in the secular world. And that it's funny because if you never grew up Christian, the idea of like needing a framework of places to like meet people and do stuff is so foreign.
Right.
Regular humans do this evolutionarily. We're biologically made to do that.
That's true. You know who we should ask? Genevieve from that GD show. She was never religious. And so we should ask her, like, did she ever feel like she was missing out on that community aspect?
Oh, yeah.
I want to ask her that. I want the next episode.
We need to get her on the
question.
Show. Can we get her on the show?
Oh, yeah, we can get her on the show.
If I can get her on this show.
I'll go harass her. She lives near us.
Oh, really?
I'll harass her till she agrees to come on.
Until she agrees. That's funny. All right, moving right along to our next question. Can you think of anything that would convince you that at least one God is real? What about Christianity or some other specific religion?
At least one God. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, what would you need?
Because that God wouldn't necessarily have to be tri-omni. Okay, so, regarding any deity, I guess it would have to demonstrate its existence to me in such a way that it would be undeniable that it's a deity and that it's not a hallucination on my part.
Right.
It could appear to me, and then it could also be caught on video, or I could have audio of it, or there could be another witness or something like that. Also, that deity would have to be not logically incoherent like the Christian God is, and can't be inconsistent with reality like the Christian God is.
Right.
So for me, I think for a deity to be able to be consistent with our reality, it can't be tri-omni. For those who don't know, that's omnibenevolent, omnipresent, and omniscient.
Yeah.
Those three things are logically incompatible.
Yeah.
Especially with all the suffering in the world.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Maybe if you get rid of one of them, that could work.
Yeah.
What about you?
What you were saying, the whole thing is proof. Show me proof.
Yeah.
That's the same thing. Come down, show yourself to me in person, in the flesh, demonstrate that you're all powerful. Because if you're going to be God, then all powerful is kind of non-negotiable. Otherwise, you're just some schmo.
A demigod? Could be a demigod. Thor is not even all powerful.
No, I'm just saying. But for me, power is an important part of a deity. Because otherwise, how could you be a god if you don't have some kind of power?
But not necessarily all powerful.
Maybe not necessarily. I'd settle for mostly powerful.
Okay. Yeah.
An insane amount of power that is clearly inhuman.
Okay, got it.
And not generated by nuclear power or something stuck in your chest like Iron Man.
Or like, Batman
right.
Contraptions. Yeah.
Take me back to when you created the world.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun.
Take me back there so I can see it and then let me document it. Take me to a place in the world with major systemic problems and fix them immediately and conclusively.
Or regrow a limb.
Right. That's a good one. And then the Christian God, for me, like, I feel like if the Christian God met all that above criteria and proved his realness, I still don't think I would believe and follow that God because he's hateful and unloving. He could be all powerful, he could fix problems, all that kind of stuff. But like, I think he's still, based on what we know about him, he's still a shitty character.
Yeah.
I might believe that he's real, but I'm not going to follow him.
Next question. Have you carried on relationships with friends and family who are religious? If so, have those relationships changed or stayed the same? And are they better or worse if they've changed?
It's a good question. And I think it's a little different between friends and family. I think on the friends side, I think what I realized is that many of the like quote unquote relationships or friendships that I thought were deep friendships were not as deep as I thought they were, because they weren't based on mutual respect and care for each other. They were based on a shared belief system. Now that I don't believe the same things as that person, I don't have anything in common with them because I didn't really know who they were outside of that belief context. So even in my last faith community, which like their whole drive was about connecting with people and the motto was everyone means everyone, I still have connections with those people, but like I haven't seen any of them in years. You know, I don't talk to them except for on a comment on Facebook, you know.
Yeah.
To me, they're not real relationships anymore, you know. So I would say I don't really have relationships with friends that are people that are religious anymore. As far as my family goes, they're like super Christian still. And they basically refuse to engage me on anything related to my atheism or humanism or agnosticism or whatever you want to call it.
Do you see them often?
I have not seen my immediate family since before COVID.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, part of it is that they refuse to get vaccinated. So that which also goes right along with their belief system. But yeah, I try to keep the door open to them when I told them, well, for those of you who hadn't heard about how they found out that I was an atheist, my mom came across my interview on Graceful Atheists, and she texted me on New Year's Eve night saying, I'm sorry that you're an atheist now. So anyway, I lost control of that narrative of telling them how I had changed. And so I left it open to them saying, look, I know this is probably going to be painful. You may not understand it. I'm open to any and all questions and to have a conversation with you about it. And I've never got, not the first question, never got a single question about it. So that relationship is, I would say it's very surfacey now. I'm not going to antagonize their religion either. Like, unless they say something really overtly ridiculous, then I won't be able to let it slide. But
yeah.
So yeah, I guess I would say that relationship, it's changed on some level, but it was also kind of slippery sloping when I got divorced too, because I was like a black sheep after that too. So
because you got divorced? Really?
Yeah, they couldn't relate to the idea of me being divorced. And I think that started to change how they viewed me. So, yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that was a problem for them. I guess it makes sense, but I didn't realize.
Yeah, they pretended that it wasn't, but it was, you know. So what about you?
Well, I mentioned before, I didn't have very many church relationships. I had one friendship from church that I cared about, and I texted her a few months after I decided I was no longer a Christian. This was during COVID, so we hadn't been going to church anyway. And I told her, I explained my reasoning, and then I said, some relationships make it past this, and I have confidence that ours will, because I think that our friendship is based on more than church. And she was so gracious and so accepting. I kept that relationship, and we're still good friends. As far as my family goes, they don't treat me any differently at all. I've talked about this before. My family has been really great about it, but they still won't engage me on anything. My sister would, I think, but I'm kind of hesitant too. I just don't want to start anything, and I don't really see much good coming out of it.
Yeah.
But my mom doesn't know what to do with me. Like, I did have a short conversation with my dad when I was explaining to him some of my views on the Bible, and I got this Lutheran fundamentalist to admit to me that, okay, maybe the Bible is not inerrant. And I was like, wow. But he said it was in matters of doctrine.
Right.
But I was like, that's not what was taught to me my whole life, Dad.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, things with my family are good. It's not much in the way of discussion about religion. Yeah.
So you feel that your relationship is the same, or do you feel like there's an 800-pound elephant in the room and you kind
there's sort of an elephant,
and you kind of just talk around it or pretend it's not there?
It might not be an 800-pound elephant, but it's a small elephant.
Like 350 maybe? Like
Yeah, 350. Yeah. So here's an example of when my sister had a baby and we were talking about breast milk and how crazy it is that it's just so good for the baby and it's like nearly perfect.
Right.
And I said something like, oh, nature did such a good job with breast milk. And my dad said, well, not nature, God. And my sister was like, yeah. And I could have engaged them, but I didn't. But it's like these little comments.
Right.
I could have said, oh, well, if God made it, why did he leave the vitamin D out?
Right.
That's something that evolution would forget, not God.
Right.
But I didn't engage.
Do you regret not engaging that? Or do you like, damn it, I could have.
Well, yes, because I still think about it to this day. I replay that conversation in my head and I just think like they didn't respect my beliefs enough to just let me drop a comment and not come back at me about it.
Right.
So yeah, there's like little elephants like that just appear every now and then that remind us that we have different views.
Yeah, my parents try to do the passive. Not my dad, but my mom definitely does the passive aggressive thing where she'll send me a link to some article or she'll want me to listen to some podcast or some. I just don't even reply to them. Like you said, like I don't have anything productive to say back, like that's not going to cause an argument. It's just going to deepen the rift.
Yeah.
I don't need to reply. And it's funny because my wife will tell me, I'll show her something like the thing I told you about where they sent me the thing about the chickens.
Yeah.
They tell you about that. So she sends me this thing about how God is like a hen gathering his chicks. And she did this because she thinks she's connecting with me because we have chickens.
Yeah.
So she thinks I'm going to use an object lesson like I'm 5 years old and I need a flannel graph on the comparison between God as mother hen and the chickens that I have. And I was just like biting my tongue and my wife like looks at the message. She goes, don't reply to it. Like she goes, you're not going to accomplish anything by it. And I was like, I just want to say something snarky. Like, yeah, it's hard. It's like, for us, it's a bigger than an 800-pound elephant because it's 400 miles in between. And there's not even any effort to get rid of the elephant.
Right. Everybody is happy to let the elephant stay.
Yeah, they're just fine. Like it's shitting all over the floor and there's dung everywhere, but it's cool. All right. Do you feel more or less confident in explaining why you believe what you believe now than you did as a Christian?
Oh, way more confident. Not even a comparison. So I never felt confident in my beliefs as a Christian, obviously. They were not my beliefs. They were the beliefs of my family that were placed on me when I was born. And I was just expected to adopt them.
Right.
I never independently chose those beliefs or became convinced of them myself. And I kind of like knew the talking points, but I never felt convicted by them. And so when I delivered them, I kind of felt like, okay, so I'll give an example.
You were like acting.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was acting. Here's an example. In high school, one time I was having a discussion with my chemistry teacher who was awesome. He is a vegetarian, or was, I'm assuming he still is. And I was debating with him about it, like how I was like saying it's okay to eat animals. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that I gave for why it's okay to eat animals is because the Bible gives us dominion over animals.
Right.
And even as I was saying the words, even before I said the words, I knew that I wouldn't be able to defend this. Yeah. And I knew that it was not a valid argument. And sure enough, out of my mouth came these words, because the Bible says we have dominion over the animals. I knew it was going to come back in my face.
And you're talking to a scientist. So it's like,
yes,
you're just going to get dominated. Like,
right. And so he looks at me and he goes, you cannot use the Bible as an argument. And I was like, I know.
I know. but. Oh, that's so funny.
My dad said I could. Yeah,
that's hilarious.
So now I actually believe the things that I say.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, if you can actually back up what you're saying with some measure of intelligence and self-confidence.
And good argument. It's sound epistemology. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
So what about you?
Well, so I was thinking about this question. And I'm kind of the opposite in that, like, I could probably still to this day defend Christianity to my own self if I wanted to. I got like 35 or 40 years of indoctrination to support my confidence level in defending Christianity. But I think the difference with like what I believe now is that it's not a belief system. I have like facts that I accept and evidence that I review and consider. And then if the facts support the hypothesis and the conclusion, then I accept them. If they don't, then I either do more research or I throw them out. I don't feel like I need to believe in anything. And so because of that, I don't feel like I have to defend or explain what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't like argue a point or I won't challenge someone on something or try to explain something that I've learned. I think now it's more of like a voracious learning phase is kind of what I'm in. I don't think I would necessarily feel confident in explaining evolution or some other, even some of the philosophical arguments that we've talked about on this show. Like, I don't consider myself a philosophical wizard. That's part of the freedom, I think, coming out of that like world of certainty, where before I thought I knew what I believe was 100% true. And now there's like a freedom in saying, well, that might be true. That might not be true. Show me more.
Yeah. To have the freedom to say you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very liberating, but it's different than the idea of saying I'm okay with not knowing because God's in control.
Or like, I'm okay with not knowing exactly how the Trinity works because I'm just going to have faith that it works.
Right. And the difference is there's someone that does know, and I'm going to try to learn from them so that I can know.
Oh, well.
On some concepts. There's some things I think that we just...
Like what bang the Big Bang? I don't know if we'll ever know that.
Yeah, we're not going to know that. But I'm kind of talking circularly a little bit by saying I don't feel the need to defend my beliefs because they're not beliefs. They're not beliefs. And whatever I think or believe is my business. I don't have a mission to proselytize.
Right. Good answer. All right, next question. Are there any sins you include in your life now that you avoided as believers or that you used to feel guilty about but no longer do? And sins is in quotes.
Yeah, sins better be in quotes. So
yeah.
If I could ever have a short answer, I could just say no. But of course, being who I am,
you can't ever have a short answer.
That's not going to just be like no. And now let's go to Susie with weather, But yeah,
cold day in hell.
Right? Like no, I don't. There are not sins, and like a lot of people think that the reason that people deconvert is so they can live a life of sin.
Right.
And that certainly was not my case. And I've yet to find a person that has deconverted that says, I really just wanted to smoke crack and I just wanted to get a bunch of prostitutes. Mm-hmm. And that's why I can't believe in God anymore. I've literally never met any person like that. So no, I don't believe in sin at all. So there's nothing that I do now as an atheist or a humanist that I wouldn't have done as a Christian, basically because I don't have the problem with guilt and shame. So I don't live a life of debauchery, obviously.
Right.
But I never did. That was never even like a draw for me. And it wasn't, that was actually not something related to being Christian. When I turned 21, I wasn't like itching to go get drunk. It was never something that appealed to me. I followed the rules. That's just kind of how I was wired, I guess. And I don't know if that's because of parenting or whatever, but one of the things that's different in my mindset was around the idea of sexuality. So my whole previous life, I waited for marriage, for all of that. And then 10 years later, 12 years later, I was divorced, and now I'm in my 30s and single again. And so I really struggled with the idea of like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Am I supposed to wait to get married again, to have sex? Because I had all this like purity culture programming. And so I kind of just told myself, well, it's postmarital sex now. So
yeah, it's not premarital sex.
You can do whatever you want. So I was like, okay. And I still didn't go like wild with it. I'll tell you a funny story. So I was dating a girl in Canada. So I was going to go up to see her, and I was going to fly out of New Jersey, where my parents live, out of the airport. I was like, hey, can I leave my car at your house? Like, you guys drive me to the airport. I'm going to go up to Edmonton for 10 days or whatever, and then I'll be back. And my parents were like, no, you can't leave your car here because we know that you're going to go up there and you're going to like fornicate with your girlfriend. And we can't support what you're doing up there. So you're going to have to figure out what to do with your car.
And weren't you like 30 or something?
I was like 35 years old. How old am I now? Yeah, I was like 30 something. I don't know, because there's like that time's a whole blur. But yeah, I was like mid 30s, 35, 36 years old.
That's unbelievable.
So I had to go and pay for parking at Newark Airport for the whole time that I was up in Canada living in sin.
Hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, hundreds of dollars, because my parents, the idea that they thought I would interpret them letting me park the car there as their tacit approval of my sexual relationship is so ridiculous.
You're right.
I know you're not in approval of it. Just let me park the fucking car here. I'm just trying to save $400. Like, that's all I want to do.
That's a good story.
For me, there's no sin that I'm like was dying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have a drink every once in a while now because I feel like it. What about you? Are you just chomping at the bit to live like a heathen?
No, like literally nothing has changed. Right. Now that I'm a heathen, nothing has changed. Except I did get a tattoo.
Oh my God.
That's not because I thought it was a sin before, because I didn't.
Okay.
It was because tattoos don't fit into my family culture. When I say my family culture, not like me and my husband and my kids. I mean like my parents and his parents.
Yes.
The extended family. Nobody has tattoos.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something that would kind of like stake a claim for myself, like plant a flag, like I am my own person and I can do whatever I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really too worried about how the rest of my family is going to view that.
Right.
So I got a tattoo on my wrist this past year. It's a DNA strand with a line from Jurassic Park, "Life finds a way." Do you remember that line?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about this.
Yes. And don't lie. You know, it's actually like Jeff Goldblum's face.
It's Jeff Goldblum.
It's on your butt. Like.
It's not. But I did consider it.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, Doug, is it cool if I get Jeff Goldblum on my ass now? I'm my own woman.
He might like it.
He might. You never know. I mean, you got to love Jeff Goldblum.
Well, it's got to be the one with like him reclining with his shirt off. Like bleeding from the leg.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. But yeah.
But now that you brought up Doug, though, he got a tattoo in the same place that I did. And this was huge for him because he grew up listening to his mom, who hates tattoos, just hates them, scoffs at every tattoo she sees out in public. And my husband kind of adopted that. Mm-hmm. So he decided to mark our new lives. He wanted to get a tattoo as like an exercise to change himself, because he's been really working on himself. And so he got one too. Oh, cool. And I'm really proud of him. And so now we have both tattoos and his mom hates it.
Nice. That's cool. I forget who said this. It might have been Christopher Hitchens or somebody who said, if you need a God to tell you to not rape, murder, and pillage, then there's something wrong with you. Like,
right. You're not a moral person.
Yeah, you're not a good person. Like, so that brings up another, potential topic for later. Like, morality doesn't come from God. You don't need God to have morality.
What is your favorite topic you've covered so far?
We kind of talked about this in the promo.
Yeah, we did.
And I don't know what I said that time, but I was thinking about it because somebody asked this. I think it's the one on child indoctrination. That topic is a passion point for me now.
Yeah, it hits close to home.
I got 4 kids, and like we do an extensive amount of work to not indoctrinate them in any way, shape, or form. If you want to ask questions about what other people believe, what you believe about the afterlife, whatever, fire away, but we are not going to indoctrinate you or tell you what to believe. So the ones we did about the inerrancy of the Bible, I think those were the 2 parts. Those were 2 of my favorites where we kind of picked apart the Bible.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
And then of course all the guests, like all of our guests were really cool. So, and what was yours?
Mine was the Divine Hiddenness episode, which wasn't called that. What was it called? The one with the hide and seek?
The hide and seek, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think that was the first episode where I did like a cool intro, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Those intros are fun.
Yeah, the theatrical intros. Those
are great. Yeah, they're kind of like a little cringeworthy.
Yeah,
little
creepy.
Little funny, a little creepy. So yeah, those are fun.
Yeah.
What topics can we expect in season 2? Great question.
Yeah, so we have a whole document that we started actually at the very beginning that has a running list of topics. And
it's a huge list.
Yeah. Is there morality without God? We have something about purity culture, prayer, Christian nationalism. I know we had one planned that we were going to do this season, which we'll now have to wait.
The one about the target parking spaces, that kind of thing.
The providence of God and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we have a whole huge list, and we also have a really good running list of guests.
Yeah.
Even if we have to be like, dude, we got Anthony Magnabosco. Like, you don't want to get one up. We're a pretty big deal. So
yeah, we're a big deal.
Except for not really, but yeah. So, and of course, if there's topics that you guys would like to hear about, send them our way. What are some topics that you would like to do?
Yeah, the ones that I had my eye on are the ones about prayer. Does prayer work? What it would be like to be God. I think that's a really cool topic to explore.
Yeah.
Biblical events with no historical corroboration and contemporaneous documentation of Jesus. Like, what kind of documents or evidence do we have that, well, not necessarily just of Jesus, but like of all the events concerning the resurrection and all that stuff. Like, what do we actually have besides the Bible?
Right.
Which is basically nothing. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. All right, this is another question we got. If there was a God, what characteristics would it have to have for you to willingly worship it?
All right. This God would have to have the kind of wisdom to know to treat people equally so that there would be no gender differences. Women and men would actually be equal. Certain ethnicities would not be denigrated. Like in the Bible, there's like outsiders.
Yes.
Israelites are the chosen people.
Yeah.
There's outsiders and there's people who are looked down on.
Right.
God hates people with disabilities. I mean, He doesn't want them to approach his altar.
Right.
No problems with slavery. And so in my mind, if a true God who actually had wisdom, understanding, and love would condemn crimes like slavery, like rape, would instruct people how to treat women with respect, that women are not property, which they were in the Bible. They were property.
Yes.
We would also not be held responsible by said God for not being perfect, seeing as how this God made us.
Mm-hmm. So equality basically is like kind of...
Yeah, I guess equality and like condemnation of obvious crimes that the Bible never condemned and actually endorsed.
Right.
Step one, come on.
Yeah, step one, condemn things that are bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Step two, do things that are good.
There you go.
It's not that hard to be God, apparently.
You summed it up right there.
Yeah, and that's kind of like my feeling would be like kind of actual expressions of the omni qualities that supposedly the Christian God has. Even though like logically it would be hard to pull all of these off rationally. I think you could have some expressions of all of those omni qualities. So omnipotence, you would actually be able to show your power and solve problems and answer prayers in an obvious way, not in a mystical way that like it's like open to interpretation. Like, well, did God do that or not? Like, I have cancer. My leg fell off. It got eaten in a wood chipper and now it's back. Okay.
Wait, the same person had cancer and got their leg eaten in a wood chipper?
Yes, of course. The Christian God would do that to somebody. Duh.
That's awful.
But a real God, would grow the guy's leg back and heal his cancer. That's power. He would definitely be omniscient in some way or have the characteristics of omniscient. Like he would demonstrate his all-knowingness by answering people's questions. Mm-hmm. I think like the biblical way of interpreting these omnis is logically impossible, but I think the rational way of interpreting the qualities is doable. So like omniscience means they know everything, which means you can ask them everything and they'll answer it and they have an answer. It's not like I'm not going to tell you because I'm smarter than you or my ways are higher than yours. Like,
yeah. And I need to stay smarter than you. I need to keep you not understanding.
Right. And then lastly, which I think probably the biggest one is omnibenevolence, like truly unconditional love.
Right.
There would be no fear. There wouldn't be hell to motivate people. There wouldn't be punishment for people who didn't believe in you. You wouldn't mandate that people believed in you. You would love everyone, because.
So your God would truly be a God of love, not of fear.
Yeah, I think that's what I would need to worship this type of deity.
Your answer was more like about what this God can do. And my answer was more like, what does this God endorse?
Yeah.
So together we have it covered.
Yeah.
That's good. Phil and I also wrote questions for each other. So this is my question for you, Phil. You had a very fundamentalist upbringing that ended up shaping you as a person. As an adult, you have made the choice to raise your children without dogma or ideology. But if you had a time machine, would you go back and change your own upbringing so that little Phil would also be raised without fundamentalism?
Yeah, I mean, yes, 100,000% yes, because I've come to realize that much of my childhood would probably be considered abusive by modern standards.
Oh, yes, for sure.
I was physically punished for my sins. I was spanked, and some of that spanking was very aggressive. the psychological abuse and like manipulation of being raised in a fundamentalist thing where you're taught that you're a sinner and you're going to hell. And yeah, I would definitely change that. And really, I'm not sure actually that deconversion was the biggest driver in why I would want to go back. It was actually probably getting divorced and remarried to somebody who was not raised fundamentalist and who already had two children of her own and had already had a parenting strategy, that didn't involve religion and, abuse, then during that, my relationship with her, going through my own deconversion process and realizing how deeply ingrained my ideas about discipline and children and stuff were based on that fundamentalist upbringing and how damaging it would be to my kids. So I would definitely go back and change that, because I don't think people realize how damaging that childhood indoctrination in fundamentalist Christianity is to a child, and especially to a child that then grows up and escapes it and then starts to unpack what their childhood was really like. Like for a long time, I probably viewed my childhood as really not that bad and would say, oh, well, my parents spanked me and I turned out okay. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't want this to sound like a parent bash, because they were doing the best that they could. But at the same time, I have made a conscious decision to not do that. There's no place for fundamentalist indoctrination in the raising of a child. And so I would definitely go back in time and
undo that.
Yeah, because I honestly don't know the amount of damage that is probably subconscious. Like, like I've told my wife this, like, we'll have a disagreement about something, or the way I'll respond to a certain situation will be, ridiculous, or at the very least not loving and empathetic, and I'll look at it afterwards and I'll be like, I know exactly why I responded that way.
Yeah, because you got your brain wired a certain way in your childhood, and now you're having to unwire it and rewire it in a new way, and that's difficult.
Yeah, it's very hard to unlearn those reflexes. All right, so I've got a question for you. In this episode especially, you've described your journey away from faith as one that was based in never really feeling certain and never really being convinced that what you believe was true. What advice would you give to other people in a similar place that might struggle with responding to Christians who challenge their deconversion with the response that they never really were Christians? Because that's a common thing. The Christian pundits will talk about deconstruction. They'll say, well, these people were never Christians, so how would you respond to someone who's struggling with that?
Right.
How to respond to it?
That's a great question. When I started hearing that response, never directly to me, because I didn't really engage with people that way, but I heard it on podcasts and YouTube videos and things, and it always made me feel bad. Like, it invalidated my experience inside the church and my whole journey out of it. Just that one sentence made me feel like none of it mattered, because I was never really a Christian.
Right.
But honestly, it's something that I embrace now. So at one point I was asked to be interviewed for a YouTube channel, and I declined because I told the interviewer that I was never really a true Christian. I never really believed it. And so my story wouldn't be very interesting. And he insisted he still wanted to talk to me because every story is valid. And he said that my experience would resonate with somebody and he wanted to reach everybody. I still declined because I didn't want to be on YouTube. This was before the podcast and everything.
Yeah.
But now that I've been involved in this community for a while, I have to say that the never a real Christian bunch is underrepresented. There are lots of people who are never real Christians who left. Well, we don't hear from them in podcasts in the arena of, deconstruction.
Right.
The ones who were casual, nominal Christians, they typically don't have a voice after they leave. They just go on with their lives. Their lives aren't really that different, but it's still hurtful. Even if you were a half believer, a nominal Christian, or a doubter, for most of your life, weren't you still pressured to believe this dogma? Didn't you still have a belief system imposed on you since your birth? Some of you were even threatened with eternal punishment for unbelief, or threatened with being ostracized and cut out from your family. Didn't you have it drilled into your head that to doubt is foolish? Because I know I did. And that is damaging. And so we had our own struggles. We're a different group from like you, Phil, and most of the people who are in this community of deconstruction who are vocal. But then there's a whole big mass of us who are still trying to recover from all that damage of the years of struggling to believe something that we just were not convinced of.
Yeah. It's almost even more complicated than someone who is wholeheartedly brainwashed like I was.
Yeah, you were blissfully ignorant of the cognitive dissonance.
Right. You had a rational perception of like, some of this doesn't make sense, but then you also had the thing of, I'm a kid. I have no choice but to believe this. So how do you reconcile those two things? Like,
right. And so I think that our experiences should not be discounted just because we were never true Christians, because the religion still affected us in sort of a different way than other people. But it did. Yeah,
for sure. Do you think it's even a valid thing to say to someone, you were never really a Christian? Because no one can even agree on what a Christian is. The evangelicals have one, here's what a Christian, like my parents would say,
right.
Catholics aren't Christian. So a Catholic who deconverts, they would just say, oh, who cares? Like, you weren't a Christian to begin with, so you were going to hell before, and now you're still going to hell. So
that's a really good point. Yeah, there's a whole range of people who would call themselves Christian, but then they would point at each other and say, no, you're not a Christian. My childhood best friend, she's studying to become a priest. And when I talked to her on the phone about my unbelief, she is happy that I'm an unbeliever because it makes me happy. She's like, God does not care if you believe in him. And I was like, what? Mind exploding. What do you mean? And she's like, God just wants you to be happy, to transcend yourself and to find awe and inspiration in something. And I told her that I find that in the universe. And she's like, well, that's perfect. You know, she doesn't believe in hell. She doesn't even know if she definitely believes that Jesus was resurrected. Like, my parents would say she's not a Christian.
Right. What kind of priest is this?
Episcopalian.
Yeah,
yep.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a valid question.
Yeah.
Do you think I was a true Christian? Do you think I was a Christian?
So what's funny is my programming would say no, that you just were a name only Christian. You were just, you were doing it because your parents did it. And like, I don't know how many times I heard as a kid, hey, you have to make this decision for yourself. This isn't your parents' religion. I decided, quote unquote, for myself when I was 4 years old. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. They can barely decide what shoes they're going to put on.
Right.
How are you going to decide your eternal destiny like at 4 years old? You know, so I find the idea of a real Christian to be like the most condescending response to deconversion and deconstruction.
Yeah.
Who the fuck are you to tell me what a real Christian is? And for me, of course, I can say I was in the shit since I was in the womb, you know, and I know the Bible better than you do, and I'll run circles around you. So don't tell me that I wasn't really in it. But then that's why I asked the question, like, for you, you would probably not even have any qualms about saying, oh, I was never really a Christian. But that doesn't, like you said, it doesn't mean that you didn't experience the same manipulation and mind fuck, you know, that I did. A different level
because I resisted it.
Because you resisted it, like actively resisted it and tried to fight against it. I had never thought about that.
Well, so subconsciously fighting. Like, I did want to believe,
right,
but I didn't know how. That was hard. I felt like I was always fighting a battle and that I could never win. And I remember thinking I would never know if it was true or not. I thought I would just die not knowing,
right,
and that I had to find some way to have some faith. Luckily, I found out that's not true and that you can falsify it.
Right.
Would you say that I was a Christian?
Then no. Then I would have said, oh no, she didn't believe it. So she didn't really believe it. So she's not.
Okay. So even though I was going to church every week and giving them my money.
Oh no. And I would use the Bible.
You would have said I was not a Christian?
Yeah. Because I would have used the Bible where it says, oh, well, the devil believes in God.
Oh. Yeah. You think I'm the devil?
Yeah.
So you're comparing me to the devil.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, so pastors used to always say, like, the devil knows the Bible better than you do. He proved it, you know, when he tempted Jesus, you know, he knew the scriptures, you know, so just because you know the Bible doesn't mean that you're going to heaven. You know, this is why I was going forward for every freaking altar call every time, because I was like, oh, damn it.
You know, I kind of think this is why I like focusing on logical inconsistencies and biblical contradictions and things that you can find in the religion that falsify it.
Yeah.
Because then it doesn't matter if I was a Christian or not.
Right.
Like, people can say like, oh, you were never a real Christian. That's why you're not a Christian. And I can be like, actually, I'm not a Christian because of this huge list of issues with your religion.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with me. It's not my fault these things are here.
All right. Well, that was pretty fun. That was probably our longest episode. We'll have to do some editing to hopefully people aren't nodding off at this point. We just want to wrap up this season by saying again, thanks to everybody for listening. This has been a really fun first season. We're looking forward to the second season of, getting better at some things and hobefully getting more consistent in releasing, episodes. And,
yeah, it's hard. We both work full time and we both have kids and extracurriculars and other hobbies.
Yeah, other wildness. So it's hard. So, but we appreciate everyone that's been listening, and we hope that you will stick around for season 2. Again, like I said, if you have topic ideas that you'd like to hear us discuss on season 2, send them in via email or our Facebook page or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. We're both going to be hopefully doing some blogging in the off season. You're much better at writing for your blog than I am. So, but you can follow Susie's blog is flawedtheology.com. And then mine is philqmusings.wordpress.com.
You want to hear something funny? When I first named my blog, I wanted it to be called Bad Theology. But when I went to go register that domain name, it was for sale for like $3,000. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Let's go with, I went in the thesaurus and I typed in bad. And I was like, let's go with flawed. That sounds good.
And that worked out really well too, because flawed theology is a whole different thing than bad theology. Flawed is about logic and reason. And
true.
That was kind of accidental.
I thought bad was more cool sounding. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So a couple quick announcements too. Next season, we're hoping to launch some new features. We've got a couple of ideas about what we're going to do, breaking up the show into little segments. And since Susie likes to make little interludes and things like that, I'm hoping I'm going to rope her into some foolishness with the segments, coming up with some cool transitional foolishness.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll love that. And we're toying with some other ideas of video and YouTube channel and stuff like that, but we're not sure about that yet. So
I don't know if I want my face on there. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But the thing we do want to announce is that we are planning to start a Facebook group, which is different than a Facebook page, just as a way to connect with people and actually have discussions in the group setting. So that will be coming very soon. Stay tuned for that. We'll be sending out links probably in all the other deconversion groups that we're in, so people can get connected with us there and stay connected during our little break. Well, cool. Well, thanks again, everybody, for listening to the Flawed Theology Podcast. I'm Phil.
And I'm Susie. Tune in next season, where we will continue to tackle the question, if your theology were wrong, wouldn't you want to know?
We want to thank everybody who sent in questions. And in case you're wondering why we didn't give names, we realized that we neglected to get permission to use people's names on the episode. So to protect people's privacy, because everyone's journey is a little bit private and may or may not want to be scattered across the internet, we just made all the questions anonymous. So thank you again for everyone who sent in a question. We appreciate it.
Follow us at theflawedtheologypodcast.com and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Rate and review us on Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you might find us. And we hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.
So next question was released. I'm going to start that over. Was released.
It's fantastic.
All right. Shit, okay.
What were you even saying there? Because you just said Liz Relee. What is that? Seems like you were going to say a French word. We're about to get really cultural.
I was going to say was leaving religion, but I just said the re part and then the lee part, and I mixed them.
It's fantastic. All right. My parents would say that I was rebellious, but the worst thing I ever did was find an empty trailer in the woods and draw on the windows with lipstick that was in the trailer. It's
do you want to know what I did once?
Oh yeah, let's hear one of your scenes.
Oh, in my church bathroom, I took the liquid soap pump and I pumped soap all over everything.
You devil.
I know. I think I was 11.